Faith in Action topic. So she contacted us and we were totally thrilled. We thought it was really important to get this done right now, and we actually bumped another show in order to make this happen now, because we think it's important as our way to support the movements of both OccupyFaith and OccupyChurch, and that because of all the things that were happening, the changes, another year would have just been too long, and so we thought this might be a good way to help energize you guys and what you're doing, and of course to support the photographer. We're really excited by Lauren's work. About the hanging in sort of solidarity with the ideas behind the whole Occupy movement in general. We made the decision together to not go out and get expensive frames and escalate the prices in that way, and that we wanted them to be very straightforward and speak for themselves, and to not have frills and just be, these images are so strong that I think anything else would have really potentially taken away from the power of the images. So we're really excited about our new relationship with Lauren, and we're very excited about our new relationship with our other panel members. So this is Lauren Kahn, the photographer, if you haven't met her. And following next to Lauren is James Lee. He's the founder of OccupyFaith DC. And next to James is Jeremy John, who's the co-founder of OccupyChurch. So welcome everybody, and thank you guys for coming as well. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Lauren to talk to you guys for a while. Each of our panelists will talk for a little while, and then I have a few questions to ask myself, and then we'd like to open it up for you guys to ask questions. And you know, it's a small group. I think we can be pretty informal. And then I have a couple remarks just to make at the end. So I want to thank you again for being here, and my own particular history in the last couple months with faith and church have been really a remarkable sort of synchronicity, have led to this, you know, I can't believe this is happening at this time in our lives, and so I'm really excited to be a part of this, so thank you again. Lauren?
Okay, hi, my name is Lauren Kahn, if I haven't met you before, but I'm a freelance photojournalist, and please tell me if I need to speak up too. I have a tendency to talk quietly. So, but I specialize in coverage of religion. It's kind of not too many photographers I think have niches. There tend to be a lot of general assignment photographers, and so for me, I kind of stumbled into the niche of religion based on my personal history. I think some of the best stories I think teach us something about ourselves, and personally, I don't come from a very religious background. I think I grew up going to church maybe once every few months. Possible my family just didn't, it wasn't something we did. And I think I've always just been sort of curious about what motivates people in faith, and how faith plays into people's lives, because I never grew up with that myself. So that I think is one of the motivating factors for me in my work. And so over the course of several years, I've kind of been developing this and doing projects about different religious groups that either people don't know too much about, or that are overly generalized or stereotyped, or just sort of religious subcultures. I've been working on, one of the projects I'm working on currently is about serpent handlers in West Virginia, and actually Tennessee now, and sort of like the youth serpent handling culture that goes along with it. And I've also done some things abroad in Senegal and India as well, about different communities over there. But so a lot of the projects I've been doing have been sort of in distant places. If you ask my roommates, if Lauren's not home, she's off in some small town in the middle of nowhere documenting some community. That's what I do. Somebody with a snake. Yeah. So when Occupy came along, at first I never imagined that there would be any sort of like religious affiliation with it at all, because I thought it was mostly a secular movement. And so when I learned that there was something called OccupyChurch and OccupyFaith, later took me by surprise, and I wanted to learn more about it. So I met Jeremy John, I think, the first day. I went down to McPherson Square because I heard some rumors that there was a prayer tent down there. But I got there and nobody could tell me where the prayer tent was or who was in charge. And so I kind of wandered around. But I met Jeremy and Brian Merritt over here. And I've kind of watched this group grow as both as sort of a source of spiritual sustenance for the people in the Occupy camps itself, and it's turned into sort of its own ecumenical movement to push for change and social reform within the Christian tradition. And so I've spent time following them. Like you see, a lot of the photos are from, well, not a lot of them, but several of them are from McPherson Square in the prayer tent, but also some of the actions this group has done, and standing in solidarity with protesters and providing spiritual support. And then OccupyChurch is part of OccupyFaith DC, which is an interfaith coalition that supports the goals of the Occupy movement. And so I think the most time I spent with OccupyFaith was in the time after the eviction, I guess you'd call it, of the downtown camps, when everybody sort of pitched in and provided temporary shelter and food and support for the protesters who had no longer, they originally didn't have any place to stay anyway because they were in the camps, so that was, but now they were displaced from that situation. So it was great for me to be able to see and follow this faith in action is what I've been calling this project. And I think one of the things for me as a photographer is I've learned a lot over the years about different faiths and different doctrines, but what's most interesting to me is how people live their different beliefs and how it plays into human life, as I said before, because I never really saw that growing up. So it's been a pleasure to work with these two groups, interconnected groups really, and see how different, Christianity and the interfaith group have been able to live and put forth their beliefs in action. So, and part of the Occupy movement. So, I guess, James, if you want to go next.
James, you want to talk?
Well, I guess if we were going in chronological order, Occupy Church
Okay.
actually precede us.
That started first?
Yeah.
So Jeremy, you'll
So I'm just gonna actually, I had this thing that I prepared, but I was gonna actually go around and talk. I realized that I was gonna start with a narrative, so I thought that, well, it tells a narrative like pictures. That's what I'm gonna do. So, the narrative of Occupy Church starts with this guy right here, Micah. Micah went down to New York. Micah went down to New York and saw the Occupy movement there. And he decided, he prayerfully discerned, and he says that he felt the power of the Holy Spirit moving in him to create an encampment, to create this in Washington, D.C. And so he basically was on IRC with people from New York, and they came to the park, and then Brian was also there. And Brian was there, I think the first or the second day, third day, okay. And Brian was all running around pastoring everybody with his headphone off because there was a lot to pastor. And so but I think, maybe it was week 2. So I think there's a period of time. So what was happening in that time, Brian? You want to say something?
It was chaos, but it was good chaos because we all thought that the camp was going to get closed down. Nobody was in tents at that point. They weren't allowed to. They were sleeping on the concrete. There was between 7 and 12 people. There were 2 GAs, one at noon, one at 6 p.m. I was going to the noon GA. General Assembly, I'm sorry.
What's the General Assembly?
And the General Assembly is a consensus model type of decision-making processes. This was between yes. So actually that was kind of where Jeremy and I met. I was one of the people who helped set up outreach with Robert and Amy Eaton, and that was on maybe day 4. And we were inundated with the press on day 7. So I was also on the setup for media, and that's how Lauren and I met, was because everybody said, oh, you're religious oriented? Talk to Brian. And Jeremy, we were friends on Twitter, and he contacted me and said, can I meet with you in the park? And that's how we met. We had never met.
And Micah.
And Micah, yeah, Micah as well. We'd never met. So it was kind of chaotic, and the tents didn't come right away because we weren't allowed. People were sleeping on the concrete, and they were sleeping in the doorways of the AFL-CIO. And tents kind of came as it grew rapidly.
But I think more importantly, you played a role of a pastor to the movement. Like, people, they were always kind of calling you in the middle of the night and all sorts of times to come down and, oh, this situation's out of hand, come resolve this. So that's what Brian was kind of like the movement's pastor. And Michael was involved in doing the facilitation trainings and things like that originally.
And one good thing about Micah at first didn't,
because he's Quaker.
He helped set up the camp, and we had a lot of discussions at the beginning. He didn't want to be seen as both a center in the GA and also a religious person. He later became more and more religious, but at the beginning he felt like it was important because he had so much work to do in the process. So he is sort of, to me, the center of Occupy in McPherson's.
Yeah, and he was using a more modified Quaker process at first, but then it kind of was like this. Said the New York folks hijacked the process and made it more like it. So, but anyways, then we met up and we decided we were going to get a prayer tent. So that's where I come in. Is you, me, and Micah all got together, and Brian put the tent on his church's credit card.
$100 a cigarette.
Yeah. And so this is the tent. So we started holding prayer every Saturday. And I kind of started to, I kind of was the one that kind of put down my roots in the prayer tent and was there every Saturday that it was possible for me to be there. And we did Bible study with the folks, and we talked about scriptures, especially ones that were about social justice and nonviolence and these kinds of things. And there was a time we had a service outside in the snow, which you can see right over there. But we also had a tea. We were doing tea with occupiers. We had the tea. But then the cops confiscated the propane, so we had to stop. And it was like, we were trying to stop it, and we were spending the night there in the tent. Like a lot of times, we were spending. I was spending at least one night a week in the occupation until I got really sick. But that was kind of how it went. I think that our process kind of evolved. We saw ourselves as Occupy Church because we had a dual mission, a mission to serve the encampment, but also to change the church for economic justice. And the goals of the Occupy movement, as I articulate them, and I can only articulate for myself, I can't even speak for Occupy Church as such, are that a movement for grassroots democracy that seeks to confront inequality and corporate power. And the thing is that we have a democracy, but we don't really have a democracy because we don't have a strong democracy. So when we say grassroots democracy, it's like decision making on the ground, local groups, people coming together face to face to make decisions. That's what it's about. And that's what Occupy Church is about. Through the Occupy Church, we came together and we sort of talked about these broader themes, in that we feel that the American church has been domesticated by the power of money, and that the church, that our society, broadly speaking, the only value that we truly hold in common is economics. And if you look at either a corporation, the only ways that decisions are made in a corporation is if that decision is founded in the profit motive, in a monetary analysis. And the same thing is political. Same thing with the political economy. Politicians make decisions for the growth of the economy. And we have a name for this in the Christian tradition. This is the worship of money. When your value is money, when that's your God, when that's your totalizing narrative, like that, when that's your totalizing value framework, we call that the worship of money. But the funny thing is that the church throughout time, throughout the last 100 years, there's been a slow sort of domestication by this power of money, so that the church can't really speak into the lives of people and can't really speak about like the fact that, you know, everything exists as private property, like almost everything exists as private property, for instance. And we don't seek out the thing itself, we seek out the money to do the thing. And there's a lot of examples of this, and I don't really have time to go into it like I would really like. But for us in the Occupy Church, as I understand it, the idea is that the church can be a motor for creating grassroots economic institutions like cooperatives, like all these institutions that can provide an alternative to the structures of our government, so that we can begin to reclaim our economy and our lives through both a spiritual and economic struggle. And we believe that the two are one, that we have to struggle both spiritually and economically for liberation from these forces that oppress us. And that's the key thing. And we also believe that a church, a beloved community, a community of people, has to be rooted in the fundamental principles of love. And as we would say in the Christian tradition, the cross meaning the willingness to sacrifice one's own needs for those of another. And so we think that these values are fundamental. But there's another piece that's also important to the Occupy movement that we think is also important, and that is grassroots democracy. So the Occupy movement is, the Occupy Church is a movement for grassroots democracy. Now, around that time, I was hired by the Quixotes. So I pitched a position to the Quixote Center. And the position that I have now is the coordinator of the Crabgrass Christians Initiative, and it's been a wonderful opportunity. And the opportunity is my job is to spread grassroots democratic initiatives through churches in a national framework and create a website that would coordinate some of these local initiatives and create synergy between them. So, what is Occupy Church doing right now? So so I'm doing that. That's what I do. But I also, part of that is coordinating with Occupy Church, which is the first group that we founded. So right now, okay. So
just talk.
Should I finish? Okay.
Don't worry about time. Just talk. You tell him when to be quiet.
You're doing fine.
So yeah, churches right now. So I'm gonna continue a little bit about that. So churches right now already have communities of resistance going. Churches have a long history of creating alternatives to the economic models, and that's one thing that we always miss in our society. Churches are these like sort of gay-bashing Republican organizations that are about abortion rights in the popular mind, because that's what the media portrays them. But what we don't see are all the communities that are feeding people on the ground, sharing their communities and homes with the homeless. We don't see the Anabaptist communities where we were recently in Harrisonburg, where there are all these co-ops that have sprung out of this Mennonite seminary. All these people that are living in like a very peaceful, kind of beautiful, idyllic environment that they've created. How Quakers have this long tradition of grassroots democracy where they like listen and they wait for the Holy Spirit together. Like how Catholics have this tradition of liberation theology where you make these community-based communities. And these communities rediscover what it means to follow God and create economic alternatives to the status quo. How Disciples of Christ in the 70s had a $32 million bail bond for racial justice, where they bailed folks out of jail who were unjustly accused. How the Nazarenes have lived in community with the poor. The Salvation Army has done the same. I mean, this is part of our tradition.
The Methodists also created had a large, strong cooperative movement. I mean, in each tradition that you look to, you find that at the root of a revival is social justice. And so for us, revival looks like spirit, but also social justice. And so we are seeking to create economic democracies that are spiritually formational. And part of what Occupy Church is doing right now is providing a grounding for Christians that are involved in other Occupy activities and ministries, and providing a theological and community basis for that. And so as the encampment started to get really out of hand, and it was really not a safe place sometimes. And we didn't know how to reestablish the code of conduct that was initially established, because there wasn't a will to do that at that point. And there were things happening that we couldn't really stand by. And in the same way that I myself would divest myself from a church body that was treating people with disrespect, so at that time we wanted to distance ourselves from the Occupy movement. And so that's why we decided to move into our home right over here, right over, can't find another one.
Right behind you.
Right here. And Greg, and also Shannon was a part of Shannon right here was a part of the Occupy Church at the prayer tent as well, and so was Charity. And then Andrew joined us more when we were doing our strategizing sessions in the house, trying to figure out how to kind of move this forward and kind of create this more network. So right now we're involved with Occupy Our Homes, which is resisting foreclosure, especially when people are being unjustly foreclosed on by banks. And part of how we've been supporting that is through community networking engagement, but also through writing and social media activism at theoccupychurch.org. You can check it out. So we've also been involved in OccupyFaith. We've been working to do facilitation and help with OccupyFaith. We're working on a declaration, which Shannon's leading that committee. We've got a financial activism committee that Andrew is heading up, where we're working on Move Your Money campaigns, or we're beginning to work on Move Your Money campaigns and those type of deeper kind of economic issues that involve churches. We've been involved in protests. We carried the Golden Calf to Congress with Catholics United. And we've also, but generally speaking, the idea is so much of the Christian, what it means to be a Christian, has been defined by people that, like, our political parties, like Republicans and Democrats. And the thing is that we have a history that is not in conversation with the media narrative right now. We have a history of social justice, and we want to do actions in the public sphere that articulate a positive Christian identity that is consonant with the values of social justice, so that that we can retake the narrative of what it means to be a Christian, and be faithful in the way that we believe being faithful means. So I have not covered everything by any means, but that's what I'll say.